My name is Ina Flynn. I was 32 years old the day my family discovered my grandfather had trusted me more than every one of them combined. I should have expected the explosion, honestly. Not the inheritance, not the money, but the way truth always waits quietly in rotten families until someone finally opens the wrong door. 6 weeks earlier, at Thanksgiving dinner, I had stood up while my mother was arranging turkey slices like she was hosting a lifestyle show, knocked over her ridiculous crystal centerpiece, and read aloud every detail I had found about my family's crimes. Tax fraud, insurance scams, fake consulting invoices, money siphoned out of the family trust, my father's failed business deals hidden under polished lies, my mother's forged prescriptions, my older sister Marissa's suspicious transfers connected to her boyfriend's consulting firm. Nobody denied anything. They just stared at me like the crime wasn't what they had done. But the fact that I had said it where people could hear. After that, silence. No calls, no guilt texts, no fake concern from my mother about how family survives hard seasons. No message from Marissa calling me dramatic. Even my father, Leonard Flynn, who usually loved a lecture more than oxygen, said nothing. For 6 weeks, I lived in my small Portland apartment like someone recovering from smoke inhalation. I went to work, I came home, I drank cheap coffee in my kitchen and tried not to wonder whether being erased by them was punishment or mercy. Then the envelope arrived. Thick cream paper, my name printed neatly across the front. A law office on Hawthorne Avenue. Walter Grant's estate meeting. I laughed out loud, barefoot on the cold tile, because I knew exactly what this was. One final performance. One last chance for my family to sit across from me and explain that Grandpa Walter had left everything to the people who belonged, while I should be grateful they even let me hear it in person. The morning of the appointment, I wore the least wrinkled blouse I owned, pale blue, slightly tight at the shoulders, and practiced a polite smile in the mirror. Not because I wanted to look pleasant, because I knew they wanted me to look wounded. The law office was in a high-rise with brushed steel elevators, wide windows, and the kind of quiet that makes rich people feel morally superior. The receptionist looked at me once, decided everything she needed to know, and pointed me toward the conference room. When I walked in, they were already seated like a panel of judges waiting to sentence me. My father, Leonard, in a pinstriped suit that probably cost more than my rent. My mother, Diane, clutching a leather folder to her chest like it contained proof she had ever been innocent. And Marissa, flawless as always, scrolling her phone with one manicured finger. She looked up just long enough to say, without speaking, "You're late, and you're still nothing." I sat opposite them and folded my hands on the polished table. "Morning," I said brightly. "Sorry I missed the pre-meeting celebration." Leonard sighed like my existence had personally exhausted him. "Ina, we're not here for theatrics." I smiled. "Really? Because this looks exactly like a pity party with legal stationery." Diane leaned forward, using the soft voice she reserved for public cruelty. "You need to prepare yourself emotionally." Emotionally. That was always her word for me. Emotional meant inconvenient. Emotional meant I remembered things they wanted buried. Marissa didn't even put her phone down. "Grandpa knew who belonged in the family legacy," she said flatly. "That's why you were left out." Before I could answer, Mr. Hawkins, the attorney, cleared his throat. He had the calm face of a man who had watched families destroy themselves over money and no longer found it surprising. "If everyone is finished," he said, "I'd like to proceed." Leonard waved a hand. "There's no need to waste time. Walter's old will was clear." Mr. Hawkins raised one eyebrow. Just one. Somehow it shut my father's mouth. "Yes," he said. "The previous will was clear. However, it is no longer in effect." He placed a blue ribbon-bound document in the center of the table. The room went silent. Diane blinked. "Excuse me?" "6 weeks ago," Mr. Hawkins continued, "Walter Grant executed a new will, properly signed, witnessed, and filed." Something small and dangerous moved inside my chest. Hope. Marissa finally lowered her phone. "That's impossible. He would have told us." Mr. Hawkins adjusted his glasses. "Apparently, he preferred not to." Leonard's face hardened. "My father was ill. He also completed a full psychiatric evaluation," Mr. Hawkins said. "The report confirms he was fully competent and aware of every decision." Then he clicked a remote. The wall screen flickered to life. And there was Grandpa Walter, sitting in that old navy plaid shirt he used to wear in the garden. Thinner than I remembered. Older. But his eyes were still sharp, calm, and unafraid. My throat tightened. "If you're watching this," Grandpa said, "then I assume you're arguing already. Possibly threatening each other. Certainly underestimating me." Marissa made a small choking sound. Walter lifted a sheet of paper. "I am of sound mind. But since some of you will claim I was confused, let's discuss who in this family was truly confused about morality." He looked into the camera. "Leonard, you have been siphoning money from the family trust for years under fake consulting expenses. I have the ledgers." My father turned red. "Diane, you forged prescriptions to support an addiction you thought no one noticed. I have the pharmacy records." My mother covered her mouth, eyes darting wildly. Walter turned the page. "And Marissa? Your boyfriend's company is not a consulting firm. It is a laundering front tied to illegal substances. The private investigator's report is attached." Marissa went pale. Her phone slipped onto the table. Then Grandpa's voice softened. "There is only one person in this family who never treated me like a burden. One person who never asked for anything she didn't earn. One person who stayed honest, even when honesty cost her love." My breath stopped. "That person is Ina." No one moved. "I leave my estate to my granddaughter, Ina Flynn. Not out of spite, out of gratitude. Because she deserves a life that is finally hers." The screen went black. For the first time in my life, my family looked at me like they were the ones who didn't belong. Nobody spoke after the video ended. The silence inside that conference room felt heavy enough to crack glass. My father stared at the blank screen with a face so red, I thought he might collapse right there beside the polished oak table. My mother kept dabbing under her eyes with trembling fingers, trying to preserve makeup that was already melting at the corners. Marissa sat frozen, her phone lighting up again and again beside her hand, but she never touched it. Mr. Hawkins calmly folded his hands. "If there are no further interruptions," he said evenly, "I will proceed with the operative provisions of the will." Leonard finally exploded. "This is outrageous," he barked. "My father was manipulated. There's no chance he would destroy his own family over petty disagreements." Mr. Hawkins barely looked at him. "It is the express wish of Walter Grant," he read calmly, "that the entirety of his estate, including the residence at 48 Maple Hill Lane, all investment accounts, securities, classic automobiles, and liquid assets totaling approximately $4 million, be transferred solely to his granddaughter, Ina Flynn." The words landed like bricks. Diane let out a broken whisper. No. Marissa stared at me like she had never seen me before. Not angry. Not mocking. Terrified. Mr. Hawkins opened his briefcase slowly and removed a slim silver lockbox. He clicked it open just enough for everyone to see several USB drives and stacks of notarized documents inside. In the event this will is contested, he continued, Mr. Grant instructed this office to submit supporting evidence to the relevant authorities: financial records, investigator reports, affidavits, video depositions. He paused, deliberately. Materials involving tax fraud, prescription forgery, money laundering, and illegal distribution activity. Marissa made a strangled noise in the back of her throat. Honestly, the entire scene had become so absurd, I almost laughed. Leonard slammed his palm against the table. You think this is blackmail? No, Mr. Hawkins replied smoothly. I believe Mr. Grant viewed it as insurance. Diane suddenly turned toward me, eyes shining with desperation. You poisoned him against us, she whispered harshly. You've always been selfish. Always trying to make yourself the victim. For years, words like that would have crushed me. But sitting there, with Grandpa's voice still echoing in my chest, I realized something strange. I wasn't scared anymore. No, I said quietly. He made this decision because he finally saw all of you clearly. Nobody answered, because deep down, they knew it was true. Mr. Hawkins slid another envelope toward me across the table. Your grandfather requested this be delivered personally. My name was written across the front in Walter's familiar block handwriting. Ina. Just seeing it nearly broke me. I opened the letter carefully while the room stayed silent around me. Ina, if you're reading this, then I've probably made your life considerably more complicated. For that, I'm sorry. But I spent too many years watching people confuse cruelty with strength and dishonesty with survival. You never did. Even when they made you feel unwanted, you stayed kind. You stayed honest. I hope someday you understand how rare that is. My vision blurred slightly. The letter continued. This inheritance is not revenge. It is freedom. Use it to build a life untouched by their bitterness. Don't waste your years trying to earn love from people who only value what they can take from you. Live honestly. That will always matter more than money. I swallowed hard. Nobody had ever spoken to me like that before. Not with conditions. Not with guilt attached. Just trust. When I looked up, Diane was staring at me with watery eyes, almost like she still believed sadness alone could erase everything they had done. Leonard shifted in his chair uncomfortably. Marissa looked furious now, but underneath the anger, I could see panic spreading across her face like ink in water. Mr. Hawkins cleared his throat softly. You have every legal right to accept or decline the inheritance. I folded the letter carefully and set it in front of me. Then, for the first time since entering that building, I understood exactly what I wanted. I looked at each of them one by one. Leonard. Diane. Marissa. If any of you want help from me, I said calmly, it's going to require something you've never been willing to give. Leonard's jaw tightened. And what exactly is that supposed to mean? Honesty, I answered. Accountability. You stand here in front of Mr. Hawkins and admit everything. The fraud, the theft, the lies, all of it. Diane's face crumpled instantly. Ina, please. No, I interrupted quietly. This is the first honest moment this family has had in years. Marissa laughed bitterly under her breath. You seriously think you can force us to confess? You can walk away if you want, I replied. But if you expect me to save you after everything you've done, that's the price. For one dangerous second, I actually believed maybe one of them would do it. Maybe Grandpa's video had finally shattered something open. Maybe people could change when the truth cornered them hard enough. But then Leonard sneered. "You've always acted superior," he spat. "Always pretending you were better than the rest of us." I held his stare calmly. I never pretended anything. I just stopped lying. That hit him harder than yelling ever could. Diane shook her head slowly. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "You're throwing your family away over money." "It was never about money," I said softly. "It was about respect." Marissa shoved her chair backward violently. "You're pathetic," she snapped, voice trembling. "Enjoy your little kingdom, Ina." Then she stormed out. Leonard followed immediately behind her without another word. Diane lingered longest. For a moment, she looked almost human standing there. Small, exhausted, frightened. But then her expression hardened again, and she walked out too. The door shut softly behind them. The silence afterward felt enormous. Mr. Hawkins adjusted the paperwork neatly. "I assume you'd like to proceed." I looked down at Grandpa's letter one last time. Then I nodded. "Yes." My hand didn't shake while I signed. Not once. Each signature felt like a door closing somewhere behind me, and another opening ahead. When the final page was complete, Mr. Hawkins inclined his head slightly. "On behalf of your grandfather," he said quietly, "I wish you peace with this decision." I surprised myself by smiling faintly. "Thank you," I whispered. Because for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel like I was inheriting my family's shame. I felt like I was finally inheriting my own future. I didn't celebrate after leaving the law office. No champagne, no phone calls, no dramatic moment standing in the rain feeling victorious. Honestly, I felt exhausted. Like someone had reached into my chest and pulled out 20 years of guilt all at once, leaving behind empty space I didn't know how to fill. That evening, I drove alone to Walter Grant's house on Maple Hill Lane. The old place looked smaller than I remembered. The porch light glowed softly against the gray evening sky, and for a second I just sat in the driveway, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe normally. Then I went inside. The house still smelled faintly like cedarwood and coffee grounds. Grandpa's recliner sat exactly where it always had, beside the den window. His gardening gloves were still hanging near the back door. It felt less like he had died, and more like he had simply stepped outside for a minute. I walked slowly through every room, touching things carefully. The kitchen cabinets where he kept the good dishes for birthdays. The hallway banister he sanded himself every spring. The little den where we used to watch baseball games together while he pretended not to notice when I fell asleep halfway through. And suddenly, the inheritance stopped feeling exciting. It felt heavy. Heavy in the way responsibility feels when you realize somebody trusted you not to become the people who hurt them. In the hallway, I stopped in front of the old oak photo cabinet. My fingers hovered over the brass handle before I finally opened it. Inside were dozens of thick photo albums labeled neatly in Walter's block handwriting. Family trips, birthdays, Christmas mornings, Little League seasons. My name appeared everywhere. Ina, age 10. Ina and Walter Garden Project. Ina graduation. I stared down at one photo of 12-year-old me holding armfuls of tomatoes beside Grandpa in the garden. I looked awkward and sunburned and ridiculously happy. And suddenly, I understood something painful. He had seen me all along, even when nobody else did. The next morning, I went back downtown to Mr. Hawkins' office, wearing the same wrinkled blouse from the day before. He looked mildly surprised when I walked in. "Miss Flynn," he said carefully, "is something wrong?" "I want to start a foundation," I said, before I could lose my nerve. That caught his attention immediately. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. "Tell me more." I sat down slowly. "I don't want this money turning into another monument to my family's ego," I admitted. "I don't want it sitting in accounts while people they hurt are still struggling." Mr. Hawkins listened quietly. I took a breath. "I want to create a trust in Walter's name. Something that repays the people my family damaged and helps veterans who fell through the cracks. Grandpa spent his entire life trying to help people nobody else paid attention to." For the first time since meeting him, the attorney's expression softened visibly. "That's a very good idea," he said. "Do you have a name?" I thought about Grandpa sitting in that plaid shirt, looking directly into the camera. Then I answered softly, "The Grant Legacy Foundation." Mr. Hawkins wrote it down carefully. "Are you certain about this?" he asked quietly. "You don't owe anyone proof that you're different from them." That was the strange thing. I wasn't doing it to prove anything anymore. I was doing it because it was the only way the inheritance stopped feeling cursed. "Yes," I said finally. "I'm sure." Within days, the paperwork was underway. And for the first time in years, the weight inside my chest became bearable instead of crushing. That night, I sat alone at Grandpa's kitchen table, making a list. Small business owners Leonard had defrauded. Neighbors Diane manipulated with fake insurance claims. Friends Marissa convinced to invest money they never got back. Some names I barely recognized. Others made my stomach twist with shame. But every single one deserved better than silence. 2 weeks later, I sat in a quiet cafe on Hawthorne Avenue, with stacks of envelopes spread across the table beside me. Rain slid down the windows outside, while traffic crawled through the gray streets. Inside, I signed checks one by one. Each signature felt like another promise. I will not become them. The hardest visit came last. Mrs. Evelyn Johnson. She had lived beside Grandpa for nearly 40 years. When I was little, she used to let me sit on her porch swing eating popsicles while she told stories about the neighborhood before smartphones and luxury condos swallowed everything. She was also the woman Leonard Flynn conned out of most of her retirement savings. A temporary bridge loan, he had called it. That was 7 years ago. I parked outside her little blue house, clutching the envelope tightly enough to wrinkle the edges. The porch light was already on, even though it wasn't dark yet. Mrs. Johnson answered after the second knock. She looked smaller than I remembered, older, but her eyes were still warm. "Ina," she said with surprise. "Oh, sweetheart, come in." The living room smelled like lemon polish and old books. "I'm sorry for showing up unexpectedly," I said quietly. "Nonsense," she replied. "Sit down. Do you want tea?" I shook my head. My throat felt too tight for tea. "I'm here because my grandfather left me his estate," I began awkwardly. "And because I know my father hurt you." Her expression changed slightly. Not anger. Just sadness. I handed her the envelope carefully. "I'm not here to excuse what happened," I whispered. "I'm here to make it right." Her hands trembled as she opened it. Then she gasped softly at the check inside. "Ina," her voice cracked instantly. "This is far more than—" "It's what he owed you," I interrupted gently, "with interest." Mrs. Johnson pressed the envelope against her chest like it might disappear.
Tears filled her eyes.
"You know," she whispered shakily, "your grandfather used to worry about you." That caught me off guard. I blinked. Worry? He said you spent your whole life apologizing for things that were never your fault. Something inside me broke quietly at that sentence. Mrs. Johnson reached across and squeezed my hand. "He would be so proud of you." This time, I couldn't answer. I just nodded while my throat burned. When I stepped back outside into the cool evening air, the world felt strangely lighter. Not fixed. Not healed. But different. Like maybe I had finally stopped dragging my family's shame behind me everywhere I went. My phone buzzed as I reached the car. A text from Mr. Hawkins. "Foundation account fully funded. Press release goes live tomorrow morning." I stared at the message for a long moment before slipping the phone back into my pocket. Then I looked up at the quiet neighborhood street glowing beneath the porch lights. I hadn't lost my family. The truth was harder than that. I had finally stopped trying to earn love from people who only valued me when I stayed small enough to control. And somehow, standing there alone in the cold evening air, that felt worth more than every dollar Walter Grant had left behind.